For coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for, to a big-time rival. So I wasn't really sure where I was going to go. And then Saturday, I saw it at 11:30 Eastern. I don't know exactly when the article published, but Jim Boeheim did a wild interview with Pete Thamel from ESPN that was just, it was insane. It was crazy. He talks about NIL. He talks about his retirement. And so I want to break it all down, but let me just get straight to the meat of the story here, which is Jim Boeheim is so old and so miserable. It is time for this man to step away. I don't even think Syracuse fans are defending him at this point. But what's interesting is, as I said, content gods out of nowhere just dropped like a insane story to me at about 11:30 Eastern on Saturday night. Jim Boeheim was clearly past his bedtime because he was just saying whatever he wanted. But anyway, what's ironic about the story is the most interesting quote actually got buried at the end. At the beginning, the story was supposed to be about Jim Boeheim. Is he planning to retire after this year? The guy is 78 years old. Syracuse as a program has clearly taken a step back, and so he was asked about it, and he addressed it in the article. This isn't why I want to talk about it, but it is noteworthy, so I'll just tell you what he said. He said, "I have no other plans, quote, other than to coach. Listen, this has been the question of the day for 15 years. This isn't a new question. It's just the calendar going, well, he's 78. It's just the calendar. If it wasn't the calendar, if I was 65, no one would be saying anything. And I'm not going to retire just because it's the calendar. Anything can happen. Anything literally. We'll just see what happens. I don't say anything because I don't know." He then concluded, "I know it's my choice. I can do whatever I want." You never want to hear, when you're the boss and your employee is not performing and he says, "I can do whatever I want," that's never a good sign. And then he wrapped by saying, "I just don't know for sure." And if that was where the article ended, who cares? I'm not talking about it on Monday's Aaron Torres pod. But then buried much later in the article, and I think smart people picked up really quick, like there was this crazy quote about NIL in the current state of college sports that, I'll be honest, when I saw it, I was like, that can't be a real quote. Somebody is making that up. That can't be a real quote. That can't be something that he just said. And he couldn't have said it at any other point because I would have heard about it. But Jim Boeheim went with a wild quote about the state of college sports and some of his ACC rivals or contemporaries at the very least that absolutely blew my mind. So here's the quote. Let's get into it. Let's not waste any more time. This is the quote from Jim Boeheim on the state of college sports right now. Here is what he said. He said, "This is an awful place where we're in college basketball. Pittsburgh bought a team. Okay, fine. My big donor talks about it, but he doesn't give anyone any money. Nothing. Not one guy. Our guys make like $20K a year. Wake Forest bought a team. Miami bought a team. It's like, really? This is where we are? That's really where we are, and it's only going to get a lot worse." To which I say, what? Did Jim Boeheim really say that? And listen, this obviously has shades of Nick Saban. It has shades of Nick Saban versus Jimbo Fisher, but at least the Jimbo Fisher rumors had been out there for 2, 3, 4 months at the time that Nick Saban said it. For Jim Boeheim to come out of nowhere and to just start throwing grenades at Wake Forest and Pittsburgh, are you kidding me? So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. And first of all, what I would say, and I had a buddy on Fox Sports Radio, because this happened during our show on Saturday, actually say this out loud. I thought it was pretty on point. Remember, this whole interview was in an article about him wanting to come back as the head coach of Syracuse next year. So first of all, the world is so bad, but I'm probably going to come back, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really, I want to break down what he said because I could not believe that he said it. And not only that, I couldn't believe that he said it. I think it's awful. I think it's embarrassing. I think he embarrassed himself. I think he made himself look bad. I don't know if he was intending to make other schools look bad in this new NIL world. But I thought this was awful. This is the latest thing, and it is time for him to go. But breaking it down, let's just stick, as the kids say, let's keep the main thing, okay? And the main thing is, here again is the quote. This is an awful place we're in college basketball. Pittsburgh bought a team. Okay, fine. My big donor talks about it, but he doesn't give anyone any money. Nothing, not one guy. Our guys make $20,000. Wake Forest bought a team. Miami bought a team. It's like, really, this is where we are. So first of all, what I would say, Miami, okay. You have boosters talking about it, whatever. We've talked about that a million times on this show. But let me ask you guys and girls a question. You guys are driving around, you're in your car, you're at the gym, you're doing whatever you're doing when you listen to this show. Let me ask you a simple question. When I talk to you, and when we think about big money schools that are clearly paying players, is Wake Forest the first one that comes to mind? The smallest school, by the way, in terms of total population, in terms of total student enrollment in the Power 5 of all of college sports. Do you think of Wake Forest and do you think of Pitt? Because I'll be honest, I do not. And beyond that, let me first of all just say this. One, Steve Forbes, head coach of Wake Forest, he has already denied this via Matt Norlander, CBS Sports. He already put out a statement. No player has ever chosen Wake Forest based on NIL. But why I bring it up is because I just want to ask you a simple question. What I want to do, does Wake Forest feel like a school that's just buying players? Well, here's the bottom line. Many of you have jobs, you have kids, you have families, you have whatever. You don't have time to break down the Wake Forest roster and who was getting cash where. So let's just break down the Wake Forest roster and ask ourselves if this sounds like the type of person who is getting a bag to play college basketball. So Wake Forest's leading scorer this year is a kid named Tyree Appleby, okay? Tyree Appleby is a sixth-year senior. Tyree Appleby began his career at Cleveland State. He then transferred to play 2 seasons for Mike White at Florida. And then he left Florida to play at Wake Forest each of the last 2 years. Again, he's about 24, 25 years old, a 6'1" senior who, by the way, arrived at Wake Forest before NIL even existed. But let me just ask you a question. Just let's talk it out loud. Does a 6'1", 25-year-old point guard who started his career at Cleveland State, does that sound like the kind of kid that's just getting a bag to go wherever? Because I'll be honest, doesn't really sound. When I think big money purchases in NIL, I don't think you're going to Cleveland State to get your guy. Oh, by the way, Wake Forest's second leading scorer, Damari Monsanto. Background on him. He was the 350th ranked player in his high school class, a 3-star recruit who committed to Steve Forbes when Steve Forbes was at East Tennessee State. Steve Forbes gets the Wake Forest job and follows Steve Forbes to Wake Forest. So let's just ask a simple question there. Does that feel like the kind of kid, 350th in the country, committed to East Tennessee, comes to Wake Forest? Does that sound like the kind of kid that's getting a bag to go somewhere? Because I feel like probably not. I feel like if he was that good, he wouldn't have had to commit to East Tennessee State. No disrespect to I believe they're the Moccasins. I could be wrong on that. The Mocs. Doesn't seem like the kind of guy Chattanooga's the Mocs. Neither here nor there. Doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's getting a bag to go somewhere. By the way, 4th leading scorer, Davian Williamson, also started his career at East Tennessee State, followed Steve Forbes to Wake Forest. 3rd leading scorer, a kid named Cam Hildreth, 6'9" forward from England. Again, doesn't feel like we're flying across, the Atlantic. We're not Howard Hughes over here dropping bags over the Atlantic to get kids to come to Wake Forest. Pitt, by the way, their best player, Jamarius Burton, 5th-year player, began his career at Wichita State. Went to Texas Tech, could barely get off the bench. That was when Chris Beard was still there. Comes to Pitt, really good player last year, now really good this year. Outside of him, how about this? Pitt's 2nd leading scorer, Blake Hinson, began his career at Ole Miss, sat out the entire 2021 and 2022 seasons, has not played since before the COVID pandemic. He is back playing at Pitt. Doesn't really strike me as the kind of guys that are taking a huge bag to play college basketball. And as a matter of fact, I think that for me, as someone who knows this sport, I think pretty well, that is the most frustrating part to me at all, because I think Jeff Capel is doing about as good of a coaching job as anybody in college basketball this year. Nobody looked at this roster and said, this is an NCAA tournament team. Yet as I record right now, this second, Pitt is sitting in second place in the ACC. They're actually tied for second place with Virginia at 9-3 overall, 16-7, and they're in the NCAA tournament. Wake Forest has a little bit of work to do, but they're 15-9 and probably on the bubble. What I see when I look at those two programs, this is what I see. I see two good teams that are well coached, and you know what those two schools are actually doing? They're not buying their teams. Their coaches are actually coaching them. So credit to Steve Forbes at Wake Forest, credit to Jeff Capel. You two are doing incredible work and deserve the praise, all while Jim Boeheim is complaining. By the way, you know what the craziest part about all this is? And I spent probably way too much time breaking down Pitt and Wake Forest rosters. But the crazy part about this is this. If you actually read the quote, think about the second part of that quote. This is what Jim Boeheim actually said. My big donor talks about it, but he doesn't give anyone any money. Nothing, not one guy. So Jim Boeheim isn't really mad that, in his words, Wake Forest bought a team. In his words, Pitt bought a team. He's mad that his players aren't getting all the money that they are. So he's not really mad about NIL. He's mad that his players aren't getting a cut of the pie. To which I say, listen, I've made the point. Let's start to contextualize all this. Jim Boeheim, man, it is time to step away. It's one thing to embarrass your university and your community and your region of the country on the court because your team stinks. It's another thing when you continually publicly embarrass yourself, your university, the region of the country where you live off the court. It's time to step away. And what I would say, and I've done the Jim Boeheim rant a few times on this show because it's always applicable. This is a program. Listen, I grew up a UConn fan, right? When I was a kid, UConn-Syracuse was the biggest rivalry in the Big East. So I can sit here and say, and people say, oh, Torres, you just don't like him because it's Syracuse. No, I don't like it because I know what Syracuse is capable of being as a program, and I know that they are nowhere close to reaching that potential under Jim Boeheim, and I also know that if it was literally anyone other than him who had the same results that he's had over the last decade, he would have been out of there. By the way, don't believe me? Here are the stats on Jim Boeheim. Jim Boeheim here's the crazy stat on Jim Boeheim. Since 2014, how about this? This is a crazy stat. I could not believe it when I saw it. Do you know that the last time that Jim Boeheim finished in the top 5 in his conference, not number 1, not won the league, not best team in the conference, the last time he finished in the top 5 of his conference was 2014. That was Syracuse's first year in the ACC. 2014 was the last time they finished in the top 5. Not won the league, not won the conference tournament, not this, not that. Top 5. Beyond that, how about this? Here are Jim Boeheim's records in the last 10 years, and I'll be quick. 18-13 in 2015. 2016, they had to vacate a bunch of wins, so it's hard to actually know their schedule, but they finished 23-14 overall, but again, they had to vacate a bunch of wins. 19-15 in 2017, 23-14 in 2018, 20-14 in 2019, 18-14 in 2020, 18-10 in 2021. Remember, that was the COVID year where we canceled a bunch of games. 16-17 last year, 14-10 this year. And so I bring it up. Since 2014, outside of a COVID year where he only played 28 games, Jim Boeheim has not lost fewer than 13 games in any season since 2014, excuse me. And yes, I get that he has made a few tournament runs. Most notably, he made a Final Four in 2016, Sweet 16 in 2018 and 2021. At the same time, though, what cannot be denied is that, like I said, it's bad, it's embarrassing, it's time for him to go. And I believe two things. One, I believe if Jim Boeheim was any other coach, he would have been fired a long time ago. But then also, I believe this. I don't even know if Jim Boeheim wants to coach Syracuse anymore. What I do believe is that he is a 78-year-old guy that has nothing to do with his time and would rather just be the coach of Syracuse because it gives him something to do rather than he actually cares about what's the best for Syracuse, for the university, for the region. It's embarrassing, it's sad, and it's time for him to go. And what I'll say is I'll give Syracuse fans credit. This year to me is the first time that I feel like they have actually, they're at their wits' end. Okay. I think for, 15 years ago, he was still winning at a high level. Then he started to kind of lose the fastball, but you make an NCAA tournament run here or there, and we'll forgive you. You made a Final Four in 2016. How mad can we be? You made a Final Four in a Sweet 16 in 2018. How mad can we be? But then I think this is what happened. So you're winning at a high level. Now you're not winning, but you're still making tournament runs. Now, here was the issue the last couple years. He had his son, Buddy Boeheim, on the team, and then he brought his second son, Jimmy Boeheim, a grad transfer, in to play for him. And so I think for most Syracuse fans, I think there was kind of this understanding. Well, we could take him or leave him, but his kids are there. Once his kids leave, he'll go. Well, this year, his kids are both gone, and he doesn't seem intent on retiring at any time soon. And so this feels like the year where Syracuse fans have lost, like they've just lost. They're just ready to move on. They're ready to move in another direction. And I feel like he's being held more accountable for his behavior and his actions. Again, there was a dust up with a student reporter about 2-3 weeks ago. I forget all the details, but how long ago it was too. But it was about 2 weeks ago. And the student reporter asked kind of a fair question, reasonable question. He completely blew up. Now we have this. And so it's gotten to the point. He's 78 years old. The team has basically for 99% of the season been irrelevant for about a decade now. And on top of that, really the last 5-6 years, it's just been really, really, really bad. So I don't know what happens. And Jim Boeheim claims that he gets to decide what his future is, but it feels like it's time. What I would finally say before I wrap is this, and I've said this many times on the show, so I want to make it clear. People say, oh, Torres, you're a UConn alum, so you just, whatever. Here's the bottom line. I am a UConn alum. I did go to games at the Carrier Dome when I was at school, and I've been to games at the Carrier Dome. And when the Carrier Dome is packed, and the Carrier Dome is rocking, and the Carrier Dome is what it can be, it is the most unique home court in all of college basketball. And I always think about that because I truly believe in my heart of hearts that Syracuse is a program. They should be in the top 15 every single year. I think when you walk into that dome, when you see the passion that the school, the city, the region has for Syracuse basketball, I still think it's one of the most underrated jobs in the country. And so I think there's a lot of people that kind of sit there and say, well, what happens when Jim Boeheim leaves? I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think people are saying, well, do they take a step back when he leaves? Well, 9th in the ACC last year, 8th the year before, 6th the year before, 7th, 10th, 7th, 9th, 8th in the last decade. I don't think the program falls back after he leaves. I think he is the one holding them back.